In a world of secrets, power, and betrayal, one man uncovers the truth that shatters everything he believed about love, trust, and loyalty. As his marriage crumbles, Kevin finds himself at the center of a storm of manipulation, deceit, and dark desires. What will happen when a man's patience is tested beyond breaking? The truth will set him free, but at what cost? Kevin Stofman, a successful 44-year-old architect, had spent most of his life dedicated to his career, but it was always his family that meant the most to him. His wife, Tammy, was his partner, and together they had built a life that seemed perfect on the surface. She was the high-powered, ambitious businesswoman who had supported him through thick and thin. When their only daughter, Robin, left for college, the house began to feel eerily quiet. Their once vibrant and passionate marriage began to feel like an endless routine of awkward silences. Kevin attributed this distance to the typical empty nest phase that most parents went through. But something didn't feel right. Tammy had always been a loving wife, but now there was a coldness in her demeanor that Kevin couldn't ignore. Her smiles were less frequent, her touch less warm. She spent more and more time glued to her computer, and Kevin couldn't help but wonder if there was something lurking behind the scenes, something she was hiding. The subtle changes were hard to pinpoint, but they added up. The lack of intimacy was the first thing Kevin noticed, and it wasn't just physical. Their conversations were stilted, and the emotional connection they once shared seemed to have evaporated overnight. Kevin tried to push his suspicions aside, convincing himself it was a natural transition. But deep down, he knew something had changed. There was a coldness in Tammy's eyes now, a kind of detachment that left Kevin feeling like a stranger in his own home. The more he observed her, the more uneasy he became. Was it just the stress of their daughter leaving, or was there something deeper at play? It wasn't long before Kevin started questioning everything he thought he knew about his marriage. He had always considered himself a strong, confident man. How could he have missed the signs? But the truth was about to come crashing down, and Kevin would soon realize that his carefully constructed world was built on lies. Kevin's suspicions grew into something more tangible when he stumbled upon Tammy's phone one evening. She had left it on the kitchen counter, forgotten as she stepped out for a meeting. Curiosity gnawed at him, and for the first time he couldn't resist the urge to snoop. What he found in her messages sent a chill down his spine. Tammy had been having increasingly cryptic conversations with someone named Mistress B. It was harmless enough at first glance, just a series of innocent exchanges about business affairs. But as he dug deeper, he found articles and websites disturbing content, filled with suggestions of power dynamics and emotional manipulation. The more he read, the more his stomach twisted. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. Was this just some kind of strange hobby for Tammy? Or was it something far darker? Kevin's heart raced as he realized that these weren't just random articles, these were written guides, tailored toward helping Tammy reshape their relationship in ways he never imagined. His wife, the woman he had trusted with everything, had been plotting behind his back, preparing for a life where she controlled every aspect of their marriage. He couldn't deny the growing dread in his chest. Something was horribly wrong, and he needed answers. This wasn't just a lack of intimacy, it was a calculated emotional detachment. Kevin began to feel like he was being replaced in his own life. But what could he do? Confronting Tammy without understanding the full extent of what was happening could destroy everything. He was walking a tightrope, balancing between love and the desire for the truth. What he didn't know was that this was only the beginning of his nightmare. Tammy was far more prepared for this confrontation than he realized. The turning point came unexpectedly, as it always does in life. Robin, now 22, was back home visiting for the weekend. She had grown up with a natural curiosity, often poking around on her mother's devices, and it was while browsing her mother's computer that she made a shocking discovery. Robin had always been a keen observer, and when she clicked on a link she wasn't supposed to, she found a trail of explicit adult videos, manipulative articles, and an entire hidden folder of secret communications. Her heart sank as she realized the depth of her mother's betrayal. At first, she thought it was a mistake, perhaps some kind of error or a glitch. But as she read through the disturbing messages and emails, the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. Tammy had been communicating with someone named Mistress B for months, exchanging advice and explicit content. Robin felt a combination of anger, confusion, and betrayal. She had known her mother to be secretive, but this was something far darker. It wasn't just about missing intimacy. Tammy was engaged in something that questioned her very integrity as a mother and wife. Robin, devastated and unsure of how to process what she had uncovered, decided to tell her father. Kevin, upon hearing the news, was frozen with shock. It was one thing to suspect, but another to have it laid out in front of him. He couldn't believe it. Tammy, the woman he had spent half his life with, had been living a double life. How long had this been going on? Was this just a passing phase for her? Or was she planning something even more sinister? Kevin was in no place to confront her without knowing exactly what was happening. But the discovery marked the beginning of his descent into the truth, no matter how painful it would be. Kevin's investigation into Tammy's behavior became a full-blown obsession. He couldn't help it, he had to know everything. As his world crumbled around him, he began to comb through every inch of Tammy's life, searching for the answers he desperately needed. And then he found a hidden email account, tucked away under layers of deception. What he uncovered in those emails was nothing short of explosive. Tammy's communications with Mistress B revealed a startling plan, a series of steps designed to make Kevin submissive to her, emotionally and physically. The woman, who seemed to hold some kind of power over Tammy, encouraged her to make Kevin feel weak and inadequate. She had been manipulating him for years, slowly chipping away at his self-worth. Kevin was horrified. He had always been the strong one, the one in control. But Tammy had been working behind the scenes to completely upend that balance. The email spoke of emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and subtle strategies to undermine his confidence. Tammy wasn't just pulling away from him emotionally, she was actively trying to dismantle him as a person. The rage that built up inside Kevin was palpable. He couldn't believe that the woman he had loved so deeply had orchestrated such a betrayal. As he read more, Kevin realized that Tammy had been plotting this for some time. She believed that his kindness and compliance were signs that he was ready to submit, that he was ripe for domination. The realization hit Kevin hard. He had never truly understood the depths of his wife's desires, nor had he ever imagined she would push him to the edge of complete submission. What had started as a suspicion had now turned into a full-blown revelation, and Kevin knew that the only way forward was to confront Tammy directly. Kevin was at his breaking point. The past few weeks had been a blur of confrontation and confusion, but he knew it was time to take control. He couldn't just sit back and hope everything would work itself out. Tammy had made it clear she was done with their marriage, and the truth about her affair was more than he could ignore. Kevin made an appointment with a divorce lawyer, hoping for some clarity. When Kevin sat down in the lawyer's office, he was hit with a harsh reality. The attorney informed him that Tammy's consulting business was incredibly valuable, worth millions, in fact. Kevin had always been proud of his own career as an architect, but the financial disparity between them was staggering. The lawyer explained that a divorce could quickly turn into a battle over assets, with the potential for a lengthy and expensive process. Kevin's stomach turned as he realized how complicated things would be. This wasn't just about emotional betrayal anymore, it was a high-stakes legal battle that would affect both his financial and emotional future. But one thing was clear: Kevin wasn't going to let Tammy control him any longer. He'd been manipulated and belittled for too long. As he left the lawyer's office, a sense of resolve settled over him. Tammy might have thought she could dominate him, but Kevin was ready to fight back, with everything he had. The next few days were a blur of preparations. Kevin started gathering every piece of evidence he could find, from emails to bank statements to hidden records. Tammy thought she was clever, but Kevin was one step ahead. He wasn't just fighting for his financial future, he was fighting to regain his dignity and prove that he wouldn't be ruled by anyone, not even the woman he once loved. Tammy's plan for Kevin's submission was more insidious than Kevin had ever realized. She had orchestrated a series of events to push him into a position of total submission physically and emotionally. Tammy believed she had him cornered, convinced that his compliant nature was a sign of weakness. But Kevin had learned the hard way that Tammy's game wasn't about love. It was about control. One night, Tammy's true intentions became crystal clear. As she sat down across from Kevin, she presented him with a small black box. Inside was a chastity cage, a symbol of everything she had been planning for months. Her voice was calm, almost businesslike, as she explained her new rules. Kevin was stunned. This wasn't just a request for him to be submissive, it was an expectation, a demand that he give up any shred of his autonomy. She believed that her manipulation and control had worked. She believed that Kevin was ready to fall in line and do whatever she asked. Tammy's eyes were cold, and her voice lacked the warmth that had once filled their home. Kevin realized, with a sickening feeling, that she had already decided that she would dominate him. She saw him as weak, too kind, too passive, too eager to please. And in her mind, that meant he was ready to be molded, shaped into her perfect partner, one who would bend to her every whim. But Kevin wasn't the same man she had married. The betrayal ran too deep. As she spoke about the new rules, Kevin's mind raced. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. For years, Tammy had controlled their relationship, and now, with one simple gesture, she was taking it to another level entirely. He couldn't let her do this, not to him, not to their marriage. He had been passive for too long, but now it was time to turn the tables. Kevin's anger was simmering beneath the surface, but he had been biding his time. He had been careful, methodical, gathering evidence, and preparing for this very moment. Now, with the chastity cage in front of him and Tammy's plan laid bare, Kevin was done being the passive participant in his own life. He had learned about the affair, the manipulation, and the lies, and he was ready to expose them all. With a calmness that surprised even him, Kevin stood up, looking directly at Tammy. "You think I'm weak," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet fury. Tammy looked taken aback. She clearly wasn't expecting this. "You think I'm just going to let you walk all over me? But I've got something to show you." Kevin reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of printouts, emails, messages, documents, everything that proved Tammy's affair with Steve, her manipulation, and the hidden life she had been living. The evidence hit Tammy like a slap in the face. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "How? How did you?" she stammered, but Kevin didn't give her a chance to speak. He laid it all out on the table in front of her. Tammy's carefully constructed world of control had come crashing down. And now, Kevin held all the power. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice low and controlled. "And I know everything. Your lies, your manipulation, your affair. It's all here." Tammy's face flushed with shock, and for the first time in years, Kevin saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. This wasn't the way she had imagined the confrontation going. She thought she was the one in control, but now Kevin was the one holding all the cards. This was his moment. It was time to take back everything she had stolen from him. The confrontation quickly escalated. Tammy, clearly rattled, tried to defend herself, but her words came out in a jumble of excuses and half-truths. Steve, who had been silently standing in the background, couldn't handle the situation any longer. In a burst of anger, he lunged at Kevin, attempting to physically intimidate him. But Kevin wasn't afraid. He had already taken the necessary precautions. With calm precision, Kevin reached for his phone and dialed the police. The situation was about to spiral out of control, and he wasn't going to let it. Steve's aggression only made matters worse, and within minutes, the authorities arrived. The police quickly took control of the situation, restraining Steve and making sure things didn't escalate further. The fact that Steve had become violent only solidified Kevin's position. It was clear that Steve and Tammy had been playing their own dangerous game, but now the truth was out. Tammy, in disbelief and anger, was forced to leave their home. She had no choice but to retreat to her parents' house, where she would have to face the consequences of her actions. For the first time, Kevin felt a sense of justice, as though the scales had tipped in his favor. The law had stepped in, and now the battle for his freedom could begin. The divorce proceedings were a blur of legal battles and emotional strain. Tammy, realizing the full extent of what was happening, tried every tactic in the book to win Kevin back. She pleaded, begged, and tried to reason with him, claiming that they could still salvage their marriage. But Kevin wasn't swayed. He had seen the woman she truly was, and there was no going back. She had crossed too many lines, and Kevin knew that he deserved better. Her desperate attempts to reconcile only made Kevin more resolute. He had spent years trying to make the marriage work, but now he understood that it wasn't just about love, it was about respect and trust. Tammy had destroyed both, and now she was paying the price. Kevin was determined to move on, to rebuild his life without her toxic presence. There was no going back, no second chances. As the divorce dragged on, Tammy's frustration grew. She began to realize that Kevin wasn't just rejecting her, he was rejecting everything she had tried to force upon him. The fallout from the divorce was devastating for Tammy. She lost not only her marriage, but also the trust of her daughter, Robin. The public nature of the affair and the subsequent divorce left her reputation in tatters. Her once thriving business began to suffer as clients distanced themselves from her. Tammy's world was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Meanwhile, Kevin emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. He had reclaimed his life, his dignity, and his freedom. The scars of the betrayal would take time to heal, but he was no longer the man who had been manipulated and controlled. He had found his strength in his voice, and he was ready to move forward. Thank you for watching this intense story of betrayal, manipulation, and redemption. If you were captivated by Kevin's journey, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. Stay tuned for more thrilling tales that dive deep into the complexities of love, trust, and power.